Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you are audible. Yes.
Okay. Ma'am, are you there? Ma'am, you're not audible.
Good morning.
Good
I'm
morning,
sorry, I
ma'am.
was
Very
on
good.
mute. Yeah.
It's okay, ma'am, it happens. So let us begin. Okay. So, good morning. Thank you for finding time and joining us for today's webinar. My name is Purnima, working as marketing intern at Gazelle Information Technologies. Our company is basically focused towards providing supply chain management solution to various industries, adopting new and recent technologies. So now to begin with, I would like to introduce the speaker, Dr. Chandra Sen Mazumdar. Ma'am did her BTech in Technology from University of Calcutta, following which she worked in chemical industries for 5 years. Later, she did her master's from Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, and worked in applied research as an IT industry for 2 years. She completed her PhD in Operations Management from Department of Management Studies, Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore in year 2016, and decided to join academics. She is currently working as assistant professor at Ramaiah University of Applied Sciences and is also a chair of operation management at Faculty of Management and Commerce at Ramaiah University of Applied Sciences. She has published research papers in peer-reviewed international and national journals and conferences and is a reviewer of three Scopus Index journals. She is a PhD supervisor at her university and member of Board of Examination at Ramaiah University Institute of Management. She has also been recognized by her university as an outstanding professor of Ramaiah University and by the IEOM Society International for her outstanding achievements and contribution and services in industrial engineering and operation management professional. Her research interests are in the area of supply chain management, mathematical modeling for decision making, machine learning application in business, and data analytics. In her spare time, she loves to read, listen to music, cook, and watch movies with her son. She also writes blog on personal and technical topics. Now it's over to you, ma'am. You can take the board and begin.
Thank you so much, Purnima. And thanks to Gazelle Information Technologies for inviting me today for delivering this talk on the trends in supply chain management. And thanks to you for giving me a glowing introduction. I will begin. Let me just share my screen and then we'll begin. Okay, so I hope you're able to see my screen.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, it's visible.
Okay, okay. So today we'll be discussing about the trends in supply chain management. So this is how I have decided to outline my talk. We will begin with a short introduction to supply chain management and what is meant by the house of supply chain. What are the key objectives and the focus of supply chain management? And then I will go on to discuss in detail about the recent trends in supply chain management. So to begin with, let us see how we define the supply chain management as. So what is it that supply chain consists of? It is all the stakeholders or all the parties who are involved, whether it's for directly fulfilling customer requirements or the indirectly fulfilling customer requirements. So the direct customer connect may not be there with the suppliers who are supplying the raw materials to the manufacturer for producing a product, but however, they are in the end, they are all fulfilling the requirements of the customer. So they are indirectly fulfilling customer requests, though they are not in direct contact with the customer. So supply chain management refers to this entire process of creating and fulfilling the demands for the goods and services. It encompasses a trading partner community engaged in the common goal of satisfying end customers. So here, if you see that some of the key points over here would be that they are trading partners. So they are not to be treated as individual entities. uh, the supplier, the manufacturer, the wholesaler, retailer, they are not to be treated as individual entities within the supply chain, but the entire management of the supply chain, the crux of it, lies on this partnership that they have between themselves. And that is where you can, through that is what you can, where you can maximize the gains or the supply chain gains that you are getting as an organization. So let us now move on to see what are the essential or the important flows in the supply chain. The three main flows that we talk about in the supply chain are the cash flow, the product flow, and the information flow. Now, the cash flow essentially happens from the customer to backwards towards the supplier, which means when the customer places an order, the customer is buying something from the retailer. And so the customer pays the retailer to get access to those goods. The retailer in turn pays the wholesaler to, or the distributor to get access to the goods to be sent to the customer, and so on as we go upstream. So that's why the cash flow, the direction of the cash flow is unidirectional. That is, it goes from the customer towards the supplier. And these entities, that supplier, the factory, the distribution centers, and the retailers, and then, of course, the customers, these are traditionally the five main entities in a supply chain. Now, we can have products which are directly sent from the manufacturer to the customer, or where we do not have a retail network, but the manufacturer sends it to the distribution centers or to the wholesalers. And from there, either the customer picks up or the last mile delivery is done to the customer from these distribution centers. So there are different types of distribution networks that a supply chain can have. But these are traditionally the five main entities of the supply chain. So we spoke about the cash flow or the flow of finance. Next, we will come to the flow of the products. So the products, essentially the finished goods, will always move from upstream to downstream. So from left to right. That is where the raw materials come from the supplier to the factory, and then the finished products are sent to the distribution centers, from there to the retail centers, and then finally it reaches the customer. However, with the advent of sustainability, which we will talk about more later, we also see a lot of reverse logistics, which means where you have goods which have reached their end of life, or goods which have some kind of malfunction, which are sent back from the customer. So the flow of goods is not really unidirectional, but it is bidirectional. So finished goods, of course, they are going from suppliers to the customers, whereas if it is an end of life product which is going to be recycled, then the customer sends it back towards the factory so that it can be disintegrated and then refurbished into something new. So the flow of products is bidirectional. So it is from the left to right as well as from right to left. The information flow also, over here, if you see, the information flow is shown as from going from the customer towards the supplier or towards the factory. Now, this information flow, of course, when the customer requires a product, the customer is initiating that request, which means that the demand for the product then goes to the previous upstream entity, whether it's the retailer or directly to the distribution center or even directly to the factory or the manufacturer. At the same time, the once the product is ordered by the customer and the information for the demand of the product goes upstream, the upstream also has the responsibility to let the customer know, or to let their next subsequent downstream entity know, that what will be the when will it be delivered, whether there will be any delay in the delivery process. So all these things have to be then told to the customer as well. So for that reason, the information flow also is bidirectional. So it is not only that the information goes from the downstream to the upstream about the giving the request for the products, but also the upstream sends information to the downstream to let them know about the delivery of the products, if there are any problems in the delivery of the product, and so on. Now, when we are talking about the supplier customer relationship, actually at the junction of each of these entities, there is a supplier customer relationship. So the customer, there is an end customer, but however, the retailer is also a customer for the distribution center. And the distribution center in turn is the supplier for the retailer. Similarly, again, the distribution center is a customer for the manufacturer, and the manufacturer is in turn the supplier for the distribution center. And of course, then we have the raw material suppliers who are suppliers to the manufacturer. And in this case, the manufacturer is the customer or the buyer for the raw material. Now, also the supplier here need not be a single tier supplier like this, but the supplier can also have further tiers of suppliers till it is actually the raw material supplier who sells the raw material to the next entity and so on. So this is not, so this is just a representation of what the supply chain looks like in its entirety, in its totality. But these are just a representation. Each of these can have multiple tiers in their at their own level. So this is what the supply chain flows entail. Next, we will go on to discuss about the house of supply chain. So the house of supply chain shows the link between supply chain operations and the value drivers. So a firm's value can be determined by the investment, financing, and decisions concerning the firm's value drivers. The roof rests on the two main components of the two firm's value drivers, that is the financial objectives and the financial performance indicators. The firm's value drivers are then broken down into their building blocks representing the supply chain value performance. And the three foundations represent the supply chain value drivers. So this is what comprises the house of supply chain management. As in all houses, the base or the foundation needs to be strong. So the supply chain value drivers, unless the supply chain value drivers are strong, they will not be able to deliver the supply chain value performance, and hence the firm's value drivers will also lack in potential and will not be able to reach the objectives of the firm. And the final objective of the firm is value maximization. Now, the supply chain management or the costs involved in supply chain are have a large part to play in maximizing the firm's value. And hence the focus needs to be there on supply chain maximization or maximizing the supply chain surplus. So the key objectives of supply chain management are to maximize the supply chain surplus, which is the difference between the customer value and the supply chain costs, and to increase the competitiveness within the supply chain. Now, the main two building blocks of competitiveness within the supply chain would be the responsiveness and the efficiency. The responsiveness deals with how quickly a company is able to cater to the needs of the customers, whereas efficiency deals with how cost efficient the products are that are being sold to the customer. So you see that these are kind of the responsiveness and the cost efficiency is kind of, uh, I mean, they need to be balanced to be to able to reach the competitiveness. Now, depending on the type of product that you are dealing with, you might want to focus more on responsiveness, or you might want to focus more on cost efficiency. So when we are talking about responsiveness, they are usually those types of products which need to be delivered at short notices, where the customer demands that the product should be delivered at a within a short period of time. So whenever the customer goes to a store, the customer demands that the product should already be there in the store. So those supply chains which need to be responsive to the customer's needs either have to keep a large warehouse, maintain a large warehouse to be able to cater to the needs of the customers, or they need to have a very efficient supply chain so that whenever the customer uh, orders for a product, they're immediately able to source it through the supply chain and deliver it to their customer. So an example of such responsiveness would be the textile brand of Zara. So Zara is basically a Spanish company where and they have some uh, manufacturers and some of their uh, producers in Europe, whereas they also have producers in the Southeast Asian countries. So why they keep the um, so the cost efficiency is achieved by giving the manufacturing to the Southeast Asian countries, whereas the responsiveness is managed by having some producers who are also there in Europe, so that whenever there is a need for the product, it can be quickly sourced from these European manufacturers, whereas when they can plan and you know uh, fulfill the demands of the customers, those the demands can be fulfilled from their Southeast Asian manufacturers. So, depending on the kind of product, you would want to focus either on responsiveness or on cost efficiency, or try to uh, build something where you are able to manage both. In terms of cost efficiency, we can look at the Swedish manufacturer of furniture, that is IKEA, where who they have large warehouses. So within their distribution centers or within the retail center, they will have large warehouses where they keep their large items, and how they manage to keep their products also cost efficient is that they do not have too much of variety in their products. So the variety is limited, which means that they can store some similar type of inventory in their warehouses. And once the customer uh, gives the order, they can immediately send it from there, and a only a few designs, so they do not have to bother about or manage a whole lot of supply chain or suppliers in their supply chain. So they are being able to achieve the responsiveness, but they are also cost efficient, and that they are doing by keeping the variability less. So these are your key objectives of the supply chain. And the means to achieve supply chain objectives is through integration or cooperation of all the organizations who are involved in satisfying customer needs. So the coordination needs to be between material, information, and financial flows across the supply chain. So unless you have a good integration and cooperation, and there is proper coordination within your supply chain, you will not be able to meet the customer needs as and when you want to, and as promised. So that is so there is no alternative to having a coordinated supply chain management. So what would a lack of coordination lead to? The lack of coordination will lead to what is known as the bullwhip effect. So the bullwhip effect, as many of us know, is where the units of or the inventory of the inventory in the supply chain keeps increasing as we go upstream. So the customer may place an order for 10 units, and so the retailer thinks that, since looking at the trend of the customer demand, the retailer says that, okay, even if the customer is placing a demand for 10 units, let me place an order of 15 units with my distributor. The distributor also then thinks that maybe the customer, maybe there is a higher demand. So the distributor then places an order of 20 units with the manufacturer. And what the manufacturer does is, so that the manufacturer is not caught with the back orders, in case the uh, demand raises further, the manufacturer then produces 40 units of the product. But what can happen is the customer demand may not increase any further. So which means that then the manufacturer will be left behind with a lot of inventory, and of course incur the inventory costs, and similarly by the distributor, retailer, and so on. So as we go upstream, if there is a lack of coordination, if there is a lack of the transfer of information, there is no transparency between the information that is received by the retailer with that of the distributor and that of the manufacturer, then there is going to be this bullwhip effect, which would mean that the upstream entities would incur a lot of inventory costs, and the entire supply chain costs would increase. So that would, because once they are incurring a higher cost, they will try to pass that cost down to the downstream, and that would also affect the customer. So overall, the supply chain costs will go up, and that will bring down the margins of the organization, and hence the supply chain surplus will go down. Now we'll see what has been the focus of supply chain management. So in the early 20th century, the focus of supply chain management was only on the movement of materials. So that is what it started with. That you are, so the focus was more on only logistics rather than on supply chain management. So you were only concerned with where the uh, supply will come from and how it will be transported from one point to another. Whereas as we went on, and today the focus is more on customer value creation and less on the customer, on only the movement of materials. So the focus, always we have heard this phrase which said customer is the king. So customer is king. So of course, customer has always been the focus, but now it is more about what really does the customer want. Is it only a material or a product that they want, or is there something else that the customer also demands? So we also need to remember that the customer today is more knowledgeable about all the how the product that they are using is impacting the environment, where is it coming from, what kind of labor is going into making this product. So the customer also now wants to be socially responsible. So the customer does not only want a product, want it of a particular quality or at a particular cost, but the customer also wants to be responsible towards the society that they live in and to the environment that they are leaving behind for their future generations. So with that, we come to the different trends in supply chain management that we are seeing. I'll start with the service supply chain management, and then the green supply chain management, sustainable supply chain management, and then the humanitarian supply chain management. And what are the focus areas? The focus areas are healthcare, airlines, hospitality industry for the service supply chain management. Then you have agriculture, the renewable energies in sustainable supply chain management, and the humanitarian supply chain management, which is to deal with the uh, disaster management. And of course, I will also talk about how e-commerce industries and the requirement of the supply chain in the e-commerce industries, how they are slightly different from what is for the brick and mortar industries. So starting with the service supply chain, so it is dedicated to the providing services on products. So which means that uh, once we buy a product, it is not just left to, once the product is delivered to a customer, it does not, the the responsibility of the manufacturer does not end there. There are also after sales services. So you have to be able to not only provide the product product to the customer, but you should also be able to provide timely and effective product services, such as repair and maintenance. It also involves forward as well as reverse logistics. So, reverse logistics is also a large part of the service supply chain. So, if there is a problem with the product, so not just the end of life product, but if there is any kind of problem with the product, if there is a callback of the product, or the customer uh, says that there is some kind of a fault in the product, there is a faulty product that has been delivered to the customer, so then that needs to be picked up, and it all, or there needs to be some kind of service that is rendered for that product. So that is the service supply chain management. And in reverse logistics, most of the manufacturers are involving the third party logistics providers, because that is where, because their focus may not be on providing either the forward logistics or the reverse logistics. Their focus might be, their core competency might lie somewhere else. So, depending on that, so they want to further strengthen their core competencies, and the logistics part of it they can leave to another organization or another party who is more, for whom that is the core competency. But again, when you are aligning, or when you are employing any kind of uh, third parties to support your organization, there needs to be proper coordination, there needs to be a partnership that should be there between the two entities. Unless there is a proper partnership between the two entities, and both are aware that the situation that they are in is a win-win situation, that is what, unless they believe that they are in a win-win situation, they might not effectively be able to support the services that are required or that are needed. So with that, we come to the next trend in supply chain management, which is the green supply chain management, which is where you are adding value, or you're creating value through the operations of the whole supply chain. So here we are seeing the example of a child's crib manufacturer, which has adopted the green supply chain practices throughout its entire lifetime. So it starts with the manufacturer, where the focus is on from the trees used to the transport to ease of recycling. So what kind of trees are being logged for the manufacturer of these cribs, and then what kind of manufacturing, what are the conditions under which the workers are working, how are they uh, helping the environment, or how are they being environment friendly. So anytime we know that if you need a large area for making a factory, you need to also have something called a green belt around the factory, because there are toxic materials that you will be exposing to the air, and of course the toxic materials need to be treated before they are let out into the air or let out into the natural water body. But at the same time, you need to be able to create more uh, environment friendly gases in the around you, so that you are able to mitigate whatever harmful effects are coming out of even the treated gases that you are emitting into the air. So in that case, if to take care of that, there will always be a green belt surrounding any kind of large factory, whether be it a factory like what we are looking at here, or it is a larger factory like maybe a refinery, uh, or any kind of other manufacturing plants. So in the manufacturing, you also have to look at what are the safety conditions or the safety requirements of the workers, whether that is being met by the uh, company, those in charge of the organization, organizational strategies. So they should not be working in unfavorable conditions. And then, of course, the consumer and the environment. Next, we come to the packaging. So, what is the kind of packaging that is being used for this material to be transported to the customer? Are these environment friendly or recycled materials, or are they too large for the, the kind of thing that is going inside it, the kind of product that is being made? Are the packages just enough, safe? Of course, you have to also look at, so packaging is where you have a double edged sword, as when you want to be environment friendly, which means you do not want to use plastic. You want to use more and more paper or cardboard or such materials. But at the same time, you must remember that the product that is being transported, that needs to be, that cannot be damaged when it goes to the uh, consumer. So you have to have enough packaging materials and also package it in such a way that it is safe from any kind of damage or any kind of pilferage. So packaging, that is also where this particular manufacturer, they are using recycled materials for packaging the products, and then they are using transportation through trucks which use the cleanest technology, and they reduce the idling and travel the most direct route. So if you travel the most direct route, that means that you are not incurring a lot of carbon footprint, and also using the clean uh, fuels. So any kind of renewable fuel, or maybe the, CNG, so electric vehicles, using electric vehicles to transport the products. So all these are ways of being green in your transportation. And then the point of sale, at the point of sale, the information for consumers includes place of origin and chemicals used in manufacture. So if many consumers, so like I said today, the consumer is also very, very uh, knowledgeable and very uh, they want to be environment friendly. They want to leave a good environment for their future generations. And they also do not want any kind of, especially in a product like a child's crib, they do not want to have any kind of toxic paints or any toxic materials. Say it should be free of lead, it should be free of any kind of toxic chemicals. So at that point of sale, this kind of information is also being provided to the customer, that what are the, where is it, where did the wood originate from, what are the chemicals that have been used, what, whether there are any toxic chemicals, that there are no toxic chemicals in that product. So then the customer will get a crib which is easily assembled, and the packaging is curbside recyclable, which means that you can leave it at convenient places from where the company will pick it up and it will recycle. So that is what is meant by curbside recyclable. And of course, then you can also reuse the crib. It is not a disposable product. It can be passed on to family or friends. So many a times we've seen that as our kids have grown older, whatever materials that we have bought for the child, and which we have no longer any use for, we all pass it on to the others in the family or friend circle who are in use of it or who are in need of it. So that is how you can reuse it, and at the end of the life, when it is no longer usable, then you can recycle the recyclable parts. So that is how you can create an entire supply chain which is completely green and which does not leave behind any kind of toxic residues in the environment. So that is what is the green supply chain, and that is one of the things that has is very, very important even in the manufacturing industry, which uses a lot of where there is a lot of emission of effluents, the gaseous or the liquid uh, emission of effluents. But how they are overcoming this, what are there are certain environmental restrictions which are there in every state of our country, within our country, or in, of course, in other countries too. And we have to meet those requirements, those environmental requirements. How much ppm of carbon dioxide or sulfur dioxide can be let out into the gas, into the air, that is all specified, and you have to do treatment within your plant before you actually leave that effluent out into the nature. And like I said, the customer is also very, very observant, and they also want to be responsible to the environment. So the customer needs to know where it is coming from and what are the materials that are being used, who are the people who are creating it, and all of this. So that is what is green supply chain management. Next, we come to sustainable supply chain management. So, sustainability is one of the buzzwords in supply chain management today. It means meeting our own needs without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So, you are able to, so we may have seen, you may have seen an advertisement, or whether it's, I don't know whether it was a forwarded message that I have seen, where a child, a father leaves the child to the school in his very posh large car, and then the child says, it's better that from tomorrow I come walking, because the way that you are using fuel, I don't think there will be any left behind for our generation. So I should get used to walking to school from tomorrow, because everybody is dropping their kids in, one or two kids maximum in their luxurious large cars, which can fit up to, maybe 5 or 7 people. So that is an utter waste. Even if you go onto the roads, we will see that there are large cars which are congesting our roads, but there is only one or maximum two people who are actually riding in it. So that is where we have to be more concerned about how we are, what kind of carbon footprint we are leaving behind. And with that, we are going into, if the organizations are going into carpooling systems, so that we are able to better leave the environment in a better place for our future generations. So while conventional supply chain management focuses on speed, cost, and reliability of operations, sustainable supply chain management adds the goals of upholding environmental and societal values. So these are the different categories of sustainability practices. So ranging from manufacturing to design, logistics, the promotional programs, the societally relevant programs, the ethical and social responsibility, quality performance, and so on. So these are some of the examples of the, by category for the existing practices. So in the supply planning and procurement, you see that there is a uh, there is something called meat without hormones and antibiotics. So we are moving more towards procuring meat from uh, organically fed poultry or cattle, rather than from those which are injected with antibiotics. So there are grass fed, and then there are organic fed. So that is, we already know, I mean, through a um, lot of advertisements, we already know that there is a large carbon footprint that the poultry industry and the cattle rearing industry leaves behind. So how can it be reduced? Then you have the information systems, which are moving more towards AI, ML, and blockchain. Blockchain is still in its nascent stages, but it is moving towards that slowly. Then you have in the manufacturing, you have water-based alternatives to polyurethane or the plastics that we are using, and the natural dyeing processes. So these are all, if you look at, all these green or sustainable practices that are so prevalent today, you will see that many of these were actually the norm in the mid 20th century, maybe in the 70s, early 1970s, or before that, okay, even up to maybe the 1980s. So today we are talking about reusable bottles for delivery of milk. There was a time in my childhood where we did not have these plastic bags in which the milk was delivered. So every morning there were these people who would come around, or you had to go to the dairy to get with your glass bottles, fill that with the milk and bring it home. The next day you wash it and give it back, and you get another fresh bottle of milk. So that was the recyclable process that we were there with. And then what happened is we moved to the convenience of using plastic bags or getting the milk delivered in plastic bags. So there is a convenience that has driven this this move from using the recyclable glass bottles to the use of these polyurethane bags. But at the same time, the way that we are disposing these bags has not been managed very well. So because it has not been managed very well, it has blown up to become a global problem where we are struggling with space for landfills. And there then we are again going back to that place where which was there in the mid 19 or in the 80s and 1980s and 70s, where we are using recyclable bottles again to deliver the milk. So it is a continuous process of things going from convenience, from reusable to convenience and back. But what we need to do, or what we need to concentrate on over here, is even if we are using certain things um, for our convenience, we need to be also mindful of how we are disposing of them. So that is very important, or whether there is some way in which we can reuse that. So that is important. Then you have the ethics and social responsibility. So there are organizations, most large organizations have a CSR wing which do which it works towards humanitarian ground, relieving humanitarian distress. So you have the example of the IEEE truck. So IEEE is a large organization of engineers, and they have this truck which is very much like the Red Cross truck, which moves from place to place, and this gives relief in terms of in times of distress, or in general meets the medical needs of people who are in the uh, underprivileged areas. So these are some of the examples of the existing practices in sustainability. Now I will be discussing two cases in sustainability. The first one is that of the use of blockchain by Textile Genesis to for having the traceability, or for establishing the traceability of the fashion and textile ecosystem. So the fashion and textile ecosystem, it is not traceability from the retailer back to the origin, but rather it is a forward traceability from the origin to the retailer and the customer. So where is it originating, and where is the fiber originating from? What are the kinds of uh, what is the kind of labor that is going into producing that fiber, till the last point where the fiber is being delivered to the customer as a product or a material. So when I am buying a shirt, or when I am buying any kind of clothing, I should know that where it really originates from, not only the material of the fiber, but even the buttons that are there on my shirt. Okay, so Textile Genesis is dedicated to creating sustainable digital supply chains for increasing traceability and transparency in the supply chain. So they have created transparency from fiber to retail, and they are also ensuring that it is authentic and the provenance of sustainable against the generics. Okay, so these are some of the steps that I've just talked about, just two of the things that comprise the steps within the supply chain or within the blockchain. So one is the digital tokens. So just like we know about bitcoins, right? In finance, bitcoins we are all very familiar with. But what they have come up with is something known as the fiber coins that are able to trace and manage the textile products from fiber origin to retail. So it is a forward uh, feed forward kind of a process from the fiber origin to the retail. So each of these digital tokens, they are like a fingerprint, which means that we all know that all our fingerprints are unique. So like that, there is a unique fingerprint which is associated with these fiber coins, which means that, and that is a kind of an authentication mechanism. It also will prevent any kind of adulteration, because we know that blockchains means that it is encrypted, and the data that is there within the blockchain is highly secure. So nobody can tamper with the data once it is put into the blockchain. So it prevents adulteration, provides more secure, trustworthy digital chain of custody across the entire supply chain. So, so one of the success stories is that of the Lensing Group, which is a leading company in the area of wood-based specialty fibers. So Lensing Group is one of the, so Textile Genesis has large customers who are, prominent names within the fiber textile industry like H&M, and also the Lensing Group, and they are working along with Textile Genesis to establish these digital tokens so that they are able to give a proper authentication mechanism and also provide transparency and visibility to the customer. So like I said, that when I'm buying a jacket, I should be able to know that where it has originated from. So if you see this statement by Mirelle Krebers, who's the business expert at H&M, she says that imagine a future where you know not only where the clothes were cut and sewn, but the sheep that provided its wool, the factory that made the buttons, and the people that powered the supply chain. So we need to know. So this is what is known as the fiber forward traceability that captures the shipment across the 5 to 6 supply tiers from sustainable fiber origin to retail. So if I am a customer who wants to be environmentally conscious of what they are purchasing, what they are wearing, then they will question about where the fiber has originated from. What kind of environment were the workers working in? We have all heard horror stories of these body shops that used to be there in the very early 20th century, where all the developed countries were sending their manufacturing to the underdeveloped countries or the developing countries, and where the the environment in which this was happening was not really very conducive to human welfare. So to do away with that, sustainability also wants to look at the supply chain from the aspect of the kind of environment that is provided, not only for the growing of the materials that is going into the product, but also for the people who are working to manufacture these products. So the fiber forward traceability or the blockchain technology that is being provided by Textile Genesis, it is similar to a digital passport where you're collecting stamps throughout its travel. So as and when the product moves forward in the supply chain, it has some story that is being associated with it. It has a stamp that is being provided to it saying that, okay, this is how it has originated. This is what it is, where it was produced. This was the condition under which uh, the workers worked, and so on. And then it shares it. And the H&M Group team is exploring on how to scale it. So use of blockchain although it is in a very nascent stage, except of course maybe a little bit in the finance industry, this is also in most of supply chain management. Also, it has, although blockchain has very large benefits, but it is still not being utilized to its maximum potential. But textile genesis is doing that in terms of how it is giving transparency and traceability to the textile industry. The next case that I will be talking about is of the e-commerce industry. So the e-commerce industry has seen a prolific growth post the pandemic, because most people now during the pandemic and after that also, most people do not want to really venture out and uh, buy products, but they are very happy with sitting at home and ordering for products where they trust, and there has to be a trust between the consumer and the e-commerce industry, because unless that is there, they will not be going back to that particular industry or to that particular company. So this is not something that the e-commerce industry had envisaged, but because of the pandemic, it has seen a very high growth in the market. And it predicts now that by the end of 2030, the growth will go to 350 billion US dollars. Already in 2021, it reached went to 84 billion US dollars from 30 billion US dollars in 2020. So this was almost a three times growth in there in that industry. Okay, and it envisages that that growth will continue. And this is, I'm talking about the e-commerce industry in India. Now, what have been some of the developments in the e-commerce industry? Again, the focus has been on sustainability. So they are using different kinds of packaging materials so that they can replace the use of the single-use plastics. So, and also making packages to measure. So you do not have a very large packaging, and where you are actually essentially wasting the packaging material and giving something which is much larger than what it actually needs. But these also have their uh, these also have their disadvantages. We will look at that as well. So when we are talking about replacing the single-use plastics, what we are going to get instead of single-use plastics will be paper. So that's the first, alternative that we come to. But paper is not always very conducive to packaging of fragile materials. And then you have to use cardboard. So that is also, so other than plastics, what can be used? And even if you see nowadays, instead of the plastic bubble wraps, many a times we will get the shredded paper as the packaging material. So that has been one of the focuses of the e-commerce industry. Then you have the focus on the customer experience, where you need to increase the traceability and the visibility of the product. So from the point of time, from the time that the customer orders a product, the customer needs to get the information about where the product is, when it is going to be delivered. So which means that it also needs a very strong IT system. The information technology needs to be strengthened, and there should be more visibility. Now, visibility in terms of, so traceability, yes, we are getting because we are able to or we are able to understand that when it is coming to us, but we are not getting the sustainability information as yet. We are not being able to know that if a product has been, what are the processes like, whether the processes are supporting the sustainability in the environment or not. So those information are still not available, but the focus is more and more shifting towards the customer experience. So like I mentioned earlier also. Now there is partial automation within the warehouse, starting from inbounding to customer delivery, the labeling, the use of automated storage and retrieval systems in the warehouses. So the automation has increased, and with automation, what would increase is the data that is available. So this data also needs to be mined and needs to be and that some in information needs to be culled out from the data that is there, and that is also integrated to the ERP system. The data, once we are, or when a customer orders a product, the immediately that goes to the system, and the system then checks when, whether it is that product is available, and then there can be automated guided vehicles or automated storage and retrieval systems, which will go and pick up the product from the uh, place where it is stored, and then send it to packaging, measure the packaging that is there, the measure the item for how much packaging is required. But those things are, so that's the reason I said it's a partially automated warehouse. We, the e-commerce companies do not really still have that facility of making the packaging as per the size of the product. It is more, there are some standard sizes, and you will see which is the nearest that fits it, given that you need to put in some packaging material to, if it is a fragile material, and so on. But there is some quality check in automation where they use artificial intelligence to find out that to find out whether a product is uh, as per the quality requirements without even opening the package of the product. So those are slowly coming into place. So these are some of the developments. And then barcodes, which are giving way to the radio frequency identification tags. They are still far away from using blockchain technology to avoid pilferage or damage of products, but and they do not really see that coming into effect even in the next 5 years, because it is not yet that much developed, or not yet something that they are, because it needs a huge investment, and that is not something that they are looking at as yet. So the developments, there are auto sorters and auto packaging. So auto sorters meaning that according to the pin code, the sorting can happen automatically. There need not be any kind of manual intervention over there. Uh, Most of their warehouses are being solar powered, and they plan to use electric vehicles by 2030. So which means that they are moving more towards sustainability and maintaining a green environment. The challenges faced, this the damage of products, pilferage so damage of products because of the packaging material. There can be pilferage because still it is not an encrypted process. The process of from the customer order to the order fulfillment, the entire line is not encrypted, or it is not secure enough to prevent complete pilferage. So it is still prone to pilferage, and because these are paper or cardboard boxes, the pilferage is easier. There's an increased cost of business because of all these developments, and the future is, of course, blockchain. Next, I go on to, and this is with this I will end my talk today. So next we go on to the humanitarian supply chain. So humanitarian supply chain management is where we are dealing with the delivery of relief materials when there is a disaster that strikes, the natural disaster that strikes. So that is what the humanitarian supply chain deals with. So this is how it is different from the traditional supply chain. So here in the traditional supply chain, the demand is for products, whereas the humanitarian supply chain, the demand is for supplies and people. Whereas the demand pattern cannot be predictable. Obviously, it is random because we are not aware, even though we can plan a little bit ahead now with the improved technology in weather forecasting and so on. We may be able to little bit predict before a cyclone, say, hits your state or your some area of your country, but or maybe an earthquake hits it, but still the pattern is not, it is not as if it will happen every few years or in the same time every year and so on. So the demand is completely unpredictable. The inventory control is challenging because there is high variations in lead time. So there is nothing like a lead time over here. As soon as disaster strikes, you have to be present there with the relief material, with the supplies, with the medical aid. All those things have to be immediately available as soon as there is a disaster. So there is really no lead time that you can talk about in case of the humanitarian supply chain. So if you see here, it says zero time between occurrence of the demand and the need for it. So there is really no lead time. The network configuration, that it is challenging because all of this, not only is it that it should be available in a place, but you have to consider how you will make the last mile delivery. The last mile delivery is extremely important, even though there might be a road network existing over there, but that may not be accessible or that may be damaged due to the particular disaster. The information system becomes unreliable, it breaks down. There may not be any information system, the networks all might be damaged. And so the primary focus is such as the time required to respond to disaster or ability to meet the needs of the disaster victims. And the strategic goal is to minimize the loss of life and alleviate suffering. So that is how the humanitarian supply chain is very different from the commercial supply chain. And the requirements of the humanitarian supply chain are also very different from the commercial supply chain. So there are different avenues of humanitarian effort. There is disaster relief, like when you have calamities, destructive actions, or there are endemics or pandemics that hit. And there is also the continuous aid work, because endemics and pandemics, they do not really end at a particular time. So we have been witness to a large scale pandemic recently. So we are all quite aware of it now. And logistics is the most important element in any disaster relief effort. Also, the warehouse management and where you will put the items that you are. So you may receive a lot of, relief supplies. We have seen that, anytime when there are, say, floods, there are many people who will provide material, relief material. So there are all across the country, there people will be sending relief material from different states across the country. But if a state is affected by a particular disaster, where is there, how do they store that material? Because much of the material might be perishable items. So the warehouse management, the management of the material, how you receive them, where you store them, how you distribute them, that is also extremely important. So these are the different cycles or phases in disaster management. You have the pre-disaster, during the disaster, and then the post-disaster period that needs to be uh, looked into. So this is the disaster management cycle and the different phases. In the post-disaster phase, what is important is the reconstruction and the rehabilitation of those who are affected by the uh, disaster. So it aims to address the problem from a long-term perspective. Also, how would you be ready for another disaster of the same kind if it happens? So that is also very important in the post-disaster phase. So with that, I come to the end of my talk. If there are any questions, I would be glad to take them. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. This is Kirit Goel. Thank
Mhm,
you for the very enlightening talk. I have a couple of questions.
mhm,
Uh, as you have seen, you just mentioned also in the last
mhm.
2 years, because of the
Pandemic.
pandemic, there has been disruption of the supply chains, and many of our principles of supply chain that we have studied and have been using till now
Mhm,
were we found that either they have not been followed properly, or they need some change. So
mhm,
what what observations do you have on this? That based on the situation that we have seen, do we need to change the way we look at or we have looked at supply chain management till now?
Yeah, see, one of the major things that I would think has changed the perspective, uh, I won't say it will completely be changed or it needs to be completely changed. But one of the perspectives is that, we have gradually, as the globalization has opened up our avenues, we have moved a lot of the, even the small and the medium scale industries, a lot of them had moved away from local suppliers to having more of global suppliers. Okay, there might be different reasons for engaging with global suppliers. I'm sure there are, of course, benefits of engaging with global suppliers. But the pandemic has shown us that we cannot be completely reliant on the global suppliers. So we need to create a network of local suppliers also. And that is also something that sustainable supply chain management practices keep, are propounding, that you should buy local, you should eat local, and you should manufacture at home, so locally. So I think that is one of the aspects that most organizations have come to realize, especially post the pandemic. So even though you might have global suppliers, it is very important to have local suppliers or build partnerships with local suppliers as well.
Yeah, I think we moved globally because of manufacturing shifting out of the developed countries of
Hmm.
US and Europe to the East Asia, especially China,
Right,
and then they're having over capacities. So they also became the factories of the world. So yeah, I think
right,
yeah,
yes,
I agree that we have to reduce our dependence on such global supplies all the time, because if there's a
right,
even a small disruption in the logistics, then the entire supply chains break. Another very
right,
interesting point I heard was your blockchain. So in fact, I
right,
was also part of some blockchain implementation, but I also found it to be very unless every party in the blockchain becomes subscribes to that blockchain, it is
exactly.
actually not effective.
Yeah.
So some of the larger players in that particular blockchain would just refuse to share that information.
Mhm.
So that's where we found that unless everybody subscribes to that particular blockchain, it will not serve the purpose.
Right.
But
That's true.
having said that, what about using QR codes for traceability? I mean,
Yes.
will that not serve the purpose that blockchains do?
QR codes, of course, QR codes, your RFID tags, all those also, serve in the purpose of traceability. But are they also as secure as blockchain? That might be a question that needs to be answered. So blockchain, we know that it is, absolutely secure. You cannot tamper with the blockchain. Like you said, I completely agree that unless all the partners in the supply chain uh, agree to share their information or agree to be a part of the blockchain, there's no use. There will be some place where the information will get stopped, or it will get go leak out of the system. But I think it is more to do with customers becoming more knowledgeable, and if you want to really meet the customer's requirements, I mean, even today we do not have, maybe maybe about, I don't know, maybe 30 to 40% of the customers may have that kind of requirement. But as gradually the customers become more knowledgeable about these things, I think, and that has already started happening because we have, information at our fingertips today. So unless that really happens, and there is a pressure coming from the customer side, I think it might be difficult to implement blockchain through the process. But it has started. Certain industries, at least, it has started with certain large players. It has started, like you saw the example of textile genesis and how they are implementing blockchain in the textile industry. So it has started, and I'm sure it will gradually catch on. I have seen that even today, I spoke to one of the e-commerce partners also, one of the managers in the industry. And he also said that, yeah, we know that it is, very helpful. It is all this encrypted, this and that, but I still don't see it being implemented even in the next 5 or maybe even 10 years. So there is a reluctance, yes.
Right, right. And finally, on the e-commerce, supply chains that you mentioned,
Mm,
in fact, I had attended a talk by the Zepto, uh,
okay.
chief operating officer, and I was surprised to find that, in fact, the entire business model is built around supply chain itself.
Yes,
They
of
have
course.
such deep planning and optimization tools that they are able to carry out these 10-minute deliveries. It's
Right.
all powered through
The supply
digital
chain,
supply
of
chains.
course, of course.
So,
It has to be because their business model entirely relies on that, right? Even, large e-commerce industries, their business model itself is actually changing. They do not now have ownership of the products. See, earlier, if we ordered something from a particular e-commerce company, it would come from their warehouses directly to the customers. Today, it does not come directly from them. If you notice, many of the products come directly from the supplier of the product. Does not really come from the e-commerce industry. So they are moving away from having ownership of the products that they are uh, providing to the customers to renting out that their warehouse space to vendors. So vendors basically are like they rent the warehouse space. So the e-commerce industry does not have for does not have to maintain the entire warehouse. So it is rented out to these different suppliers and or manufacturers, and they are the ones who will then manage it. It's like something like a vendor managed inventory, where looking at the kind of demand that is there, they will replenish the stocks. So the business model itself is shifting, but e-commerce industries, their entire, and since you are connecting so many entities, so you have all these different vendors who are supplying the different products. Some may be perishable products, like in case of, say, Zepto and Blinkit and all of those things. They have a lot of perishable products. So these, some are perishable products, some are non-perishable products. So you have to manage it very well. Unless you devote a lot of resources into the supply chain, your entire business model will fail. So that has to be there in any, even in a traditional manufacturing or traditional industry also. uh, we say that 60 to 70% of their costs are tied up in the supply chain, whereas in such e-commerce industries where their entire business model relies on how quickly they are able to respond to customer requirements, of course they will have um, a lot of their cash tied up into the supply chain.
exactly, ma'am. Thank you so much. I don't have any other further questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other
Uh,
questions? Yes.
Thank you so much, ma'am. It was a really wonderful session with you. We got to know very much new things about, emerging trends in the supply chain management system. So we were great to have you on board with us now. Thank you so much for your, great session. And we would like to have further session and, coming future too with you. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.